Good afternoon, class. My name is Roman Luco, and I will be your flight instructor today. Today, we will be going over lost communications. So, about a month ago, Ethiopian's airline flight was actually intercepted by fighter jets out of Italy. What happened is the aircraft lost communications. It made no effort to contact anyone or squawk 7600 to indicate that the communications had been lost. So, for safety reasons, they were intercepted by fighter jets. And that's the last thing you want to happen to you as a pilot is to see two fighter jets flying along the side of you and to find out simply because you've lost communications. If they had simply squawked 7600 and followed the FAA procedures, they would not have been in that situation. So for today's lesson, I want to make sure that you're educated pilots and know how to operate in a lost communication situation based on the regulation, but also using aeronautical decision making. So that's going to be our goal for today's lesson. Once again, to make you more educated pilots, make sure that you're safe. We're going to go over a couple elements in this section. One of the most important things we need to do is go over the purpose of discussing lost comms, understanding the ACS and the PTS standard, and we'll talk about some of the decisions you need to make and how aeronautical decision making and single pilot resource management comes into effect. So, what exactly is lost communication? Well, lost communication is defined by Part 91 as two-way radio communication failure. Now, it's not always easily noticeable. Unless you have a complete electrical failure, it's going to be a bit of a process to figure out what is causing you to lose communication. But one thing we need to note is that the majority of the time, it's usually a pilot error. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the steps you need to take if you do feel like you have a lost communication situation. First thing you should check is probably your radios. I'd go over the radios, make sure that you're on the correct frequency, adjust your volume. If you just recently had a frequency change, go back to the last frequency and see if you can hear anybody on that frequency. You might want to go to CTAF and see if you hear anybody else on their frequencies, or even switch to COM2. Another troubleshooting technique that you should probably use is to check your headset. A lot of times it could be simple as your headset isn't plugged in. When you're flying around the aircraft, juggling a lot of different things, you're focusing on aviating, navigating, and communicating. Well, sometimes you miss small things. Maybe your knee board knocked the plug out. Maybe one of your plugs is frayed or damaged, and you're just not aware of it. It's always important to check your headset, and if it's not working, another thing you could do is just switch to another jack. The co-pilot or passenger jacks may be able to give you some type of communication skills or communication capability, but also note that you're going to have to use the mic on the other controls in order to communicate. So that's just a side note there. Another big one, check your circuit breakers. Circuit breakers pop. It's part of the electrical system of the aircraft, and there could be an overload. Check the circuit breakers, reset the circuit breakers. Another thing you need to understand is your battery voltage. So in the Piper, you're looking for 28 volts. So you need to see if you have enough voltage to actually use the radios in this situation. So you went through the troubleshooting process. Now you can officially say to yourself, I have a lost communication situation. Now what? Well, there's certain procedures laid out in the AIM that you should follow in the event of a lost communication. One of the most important things you need to do is squawk 7600. There's four important frequencies you need to be aware of as a pilot. 1200, which is going to be your standard VFR frequency. 7500, which is a hijacking. 7600, which is lost comms. And 7700, which is going to be a emergency situation. So 7600 is the proper frequency you need to use in this situation. By squawking 7600, what you're doing is you're informing ATC that, hey, I have lost communication failure. And what they will do is they will do everything in their power to safely help you get back on the ground and even try to clear the runway for you. It's going to make sure that if you're within radar service, that they're going to be able to track your location and also guide other aircrafts around you. So let's talk about the next thing. So we verified that you have lost communications. You squawk 7600. You have tools at your disposal, and a lot of these tools. This is when it comes down to decision making. You have a cell phone or your tablet. It could be simple as calling the tower, air traffic control, and letting them know, hey, I have lost communications. And the use of the cell phone is great now because, hey, they can give you landing, they can give you traffic pattern instructions, landing instructions from your cell phone. So always make sure you utilize your resources and never think that the situation is dire. This is one of the important situations where you definitely need to think outside of the box. Another thing, make yourself visible. Your aircraft is equipped with multiple lights, beacons, strobes, landing light, taxi lights. You're in a lost comm situation, especially if you are in non-radar contact or an untowered airport. You want to make yourself as visible as possible to other aircrafts, because the last thing you want is to have a collision because an aircraft didn't see you, especially if you're doing this flight early in the morning or close to sunset. Um, vision, the light available is going to be less, so you want to make sure that you increase your visibility at using all the resources that you have. All right, so the procedure. There's two primary procedures. There's the VFR procedure and the IFR procedure. Now, since we're operating simply as private pilots who do not have an instrument rating, we're going to talk specifically about the VFR condition. Now, the most important thing when losing comms in VFR is to remain VFR or VMC in that situation. You do not want to have no communication and also be blind. Flying into a cloud is the last thing you want to do when you can't communicate with anyone because you don't know what's on the other side or what possibly could be in the clouds. So, you've lost comms, you were in radar contact, you want to come into land. The important thing you need to do is understand the light gun signals that the airport is going to provide to you. These light gun signals are very simple, but also have very specific meaning to them. Because once you squawk 7600, they're going to do everything they can do to possibly get you down to the ground as soon as possible. Because another thing is they don't know how much fuel you have either. So during the day, a good way to acknowledge these signs are to, you could, rock your wings, rock the aircraft to let them know, hey, I acknowledge your signals. Another way to acknowledge signals if you're flying at night, or as we talked about before, close to sunset, you can acknowledge them by flashing or blinking your landing lights. So let's talk about what happens once they start utilizing these light gun signals. So, biggest part of losing comms is understanding aeronautical decision making. Because everything you do is going to be based on your aeronautical decision making and single pilot resources. So, if you look at what it says in the AIM, it says that pilots are expected to exercise good judgment in whatever action they elect to take. So they understand it's an emergency situation. So they expect you to make the best decision based on the available options. That does not mean that you're precluded from following, you know, basic understanding of rules of the airways, but they understand that some deviation may be required to ensure your safety. So we have scenario one here, and we're talking about a lost comm situation and you're outside of Class Charlie airspace. What would you do? Well, there's a couple options you can do here. One, squawk lost comms, and you can try to go into the airspace. But there's a runway here, the Hidden Rivers runway, which is a private airport. Or you can go down a little further to Venice, which is going to have an untowered airport. And if you feel like you can safely navigate to the traffic pattern, I would land there. So, to summarize it all, today we went over lost communications, light gun signals, and aeronautical decision making. I hope based on this lesson that you've learned the importance of understanding the procedures, making aeronautical decisions, and understanding the light gun signals. Please take this lesson with you, and hopefully if you're in a lost comm situation, you will react appropriately. Have a good day.